The Galactic Federation had always been a fractured collection of species, each with its own agendas, some seeking dominance, others survival. In this mix, humanity had emerged as an unexpected power, not through conquest or intimidation, but through alliances with those who sought peace and protection. Their alliances were built on mutual respect and, more importantly, trust. The human pledge was simple: harm one of us, and you'll face all of us. This promise of solidarity wasn't just a slogan. It was something that had been proven time and time again. Small alien civilizations that once lived under the constant threat of extinction or enslavement found sanctuary under humanity's protective wing. Earth didn't view them as lesser or expendable. They were equals, partners in a galaxy that often saw the weak as prey. One such ally, the Illyrian Confederacy, had long been under the radar, a peaceful species known for their advanced agricultural technologies but lacking any meaningful military defense. They had become one of Earth's closest allies, trading resources and knowledge in a mutually beneficial relationship. However, the Illyrians occupied a sector of space that was highly coveted by the Zither Dominion, a ruthless empire bent on expanding its borders by any means necessary. The Zither, led by their warlord Emperor Kravas, had a long history of crushing weaker civilizations, absorbing their worlds into the empire, and exploiting their resources without mercy. The Illyrians had, for a time, managed to avoid their attention, but now, the Zither saw their lush agricultural worlds as ripe for conquest. The Illyrians knew they were no match for the war machines of the Zither. They had only one option: to turn to their human allies for protection. When the request for aid came, humanity didn't hesitate. It wasn't a question of whether or not to defend the Illyrians. The humans had given their word. Protecting their allies wasn't just a strategic decision, it was a matter of honor. Earth's leaders convened and agreed unanimously: the Zither must be stopped before they even attempted an invasion. A single, clear message was dispatched to Emperor Kravas, who was already amassing his fleet near the Illyrian border. The message was blunt, with no room for interpretation. Do not harm our alien allies. We will not give another warning. For a brief moment, the galaxy held its breath. The Zither Dominion, known for its aggressive expansion, had rarely been challenged so directly. Most species chose appeasement, or retreated to safer sectors rather than face the full might of Kravas' war machine. But the humans were different. They had the audacity to not only challenge the Zither but to stand up for a smaller, weaker species that most would have written off as insignificant. Kravas, unsurprisingly, scoffed at the warning. He saw the humans as upstarts, an annoyingly idealistic species that had only recently entered the galactic stage. The idea that they would risk war with the Zither over a few weak agricultural planets was laughable to him. In his eyes, humans were foolish, naive, and unprepared for the consequences of defying an empire as vast and powerful as the Zither Dominion. Kravas issued his response. Your threats mean nothing. Withdraw, or you will share their fate. The message was broadcast throughout the galaxy, a declaration of Kravas' disdain for humanity's protection of its allies. Many galactic powers watched closely, wondering what the humans would do. Most expected them to back down. After all, the Zither's military was one of the largest in the galaxy, and humanity, despite its growing reputation, didn't possess the same sheer numbers or territorial reach. It seemed inevitable that Earth would be forced to withdraw its protection, leaving the Illyrians to be swallowed by the Zither. But Earth's response was silence. There was no immediate diplomatic back and forth, no posturing. Humanity had already made its position clear. They had given the Zither one warning, and there would be no more. Kravas, sensing weakness in their silence, took it as confirmation that the humans wouldn't dare challenge him. He saw the Illyrian worlds as his for the taking. Confident in his superiority, Kravas mobilized his forces for the invasion. His generals were eager, already discussing how they would divide the spoils once the Illyrian Confederacy fell. It would be an easy victory, and they would add another sector to the ever-expanding Zither Empire. But Kravas underestimated one thing: human resolve. As his fleet prepared to cross into Illyrian space, Earth was already watching. Intelligence had predicted Kravas' moves, and humanity's forces were standing by, ready for action. Earth's military was not the largest in the galaxy, but it didn't need to be. Over the years, humans had honed their technological superiority and developed highly advanced tactical strategies. They knew how to fight smart, not just hard. They didn't rely on sheer numbers but on precision, strategy, and the ability to adapt faster than any other species. Humanity had also forged a reputation for being fiercely protective of their allies. They had built relationships based on mutual benefit, but more than that, on trust and loyalty. The Illyrians, who had once feared being wiped out, now had hope because they knew that humans would stand with them, no matter the odds. In the hours leading up to the Zither invasion, humanity began to quietly position its fleet. There would be no grand display of power, no preemptive strikes. That wasn't how they operated. Instead, they waited, watching as Krava's forces crossed into Illyrian space. The human fleet, strategically cloaked and hidden in the outer sectors of the system, was ready to respond the moment the Zither made their move. Back on Earth, the message had already been sent. Do not harm our alien allies. It was a simple statement, but one with immense weight behind it. For humanity, it wasn't just a diplomatic warning, it was a promise. A promise to their friends, to their allies, and to the galaxy. Anyone who threatened those under humanity's protection would face consequences. The Zither, as arrogant as ever, disregarded the message. Their ships, massive and heavily armored, surged into Illyrian territory. The invasion had begun. Kravas, watching from the bridge of his command ship, was certain of his victory. In his mind, the humans had already backed down. They hadn't responded to his challenge. As far as he was concerned, they were nothing more than empty talk. But he was wrong. Terribly wrong. Humanity hadn't responded with words because their response would come in action. They had given their warning, and now, the Zither would learn what it meant to provoke Earth. As the first Zither ships began their assault on Illyrian settlements, they were met not by resistance from the Illyrians, but by the arrival of the human fleet. Ships, sleek and agile, emerged from their hidden positions. The Zither fleet, caught off guard, scrambled to react. Kravas watched in shock as human warships appeared on the tactical display, encircling his invasion force. He had assumed humanity would be too afraid to engage directly, but now, his fleet was being surrounded. The Zither fleet was paralyzed for just a fraction of a second, but in battle, a fraction was all humanity needed. The sleek, agile human ships moved with deadly precision, their coordinated strikes aimed at the weakest points of the Zither vessels. Shields flickered and failed, and the once imposing warships began to fall apart under the barrage. What Kravas had thought was an easy conquest was now rapidly spiraling into chaos. The human fleet, though smaller in number, was superior in strategy. Each ship was equipped with advanced weaponry that exploited the outdated defensive systems of the Zither. Railguns tore through hulls, plasma cannons melted armor, and targeting systems honed in on critical points with surgical accuracy. For every Zither ship that tried to retaliate, 3 more were already crippled. The invasion fleet, which had been built on arrogance and an expectation of overwhelming victory, was now a target-rich environment for the human forces. From his command ship, Kravas watched in disbelief. His fleet, the pride of the Zither Dominion, was being methodically dismantled by what he had considered a lesser species. His own ship, one of the largest in the fleet, shuddered under the impact of human firepower. How could this be happening? His mind raced as the tactical display before him showed the rapid depletion of his forces. Ship after ship blinked out of existence, their signals gone, consumed in the chaos of humanity's counteroffensive. Kravas barked orders, demanding his forces regroup and focus their fire on the human vessels. His commanders scrambled to comply, but it was too late. The human fleet was already one step ahead, using their speed and coordination to keep the Zither ships off balance. Every Zither move was anticipated, every tactic countered with deadly efficiency. The Zither's sheer numbers should have been an advantage, but now it worked against them. Their bulky, slower-moving ships collided with each other as they tried to maneuver under the intense pressure of the human attack. The humans, on the other hand, moved like a well-oiled machine. Smaller, faster ships darted in and out of the Zither's formations, hitting hard and then disappearing before the Zither could retaliate. It was warfare at a level Kravas had never seen, and for the first time, he realized that he had gravely underestimated the humans. Humanity's strength was not just in their technology, but in their adaptability. They fought with a purpose that Kravas couldn't comprehend, a deep, almost primal drive to protect their allies. Every shot they fired, every ship they took down, was part of a larger strategy. They weren't just defending the Illyrians, they were sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity had warned the Zither not to harm their allies, and now the consequences of ignoring that warning were being played out in real time. On the ground, the Zither invasion forces met a similar fate. They had expected to overrun the Illyrian defenses in a matter of hours, but instead, they were met by human ground forces who had already been deployed to the key cities and strategic points on the planet. These human soldiers weren't just there to hold the line, they were there to push the Zither back. Human special forces, clad in advanced battle armor and equipped with cutting-edge weapons, moved through the urban environments like ghosts. The Zither troops, known for their brute force, were no match for the tactical superiority of the human ground teams. Ambushes, guerrilla tactics, and coordinated strikes left the Zither forces disoriented and vulnerable. For every inch of ground they gained, they lost 10 more to the relentless human counterattacks. The Illyrians, once terrified and preparing for annihilation, now found themselves inspired by the human resistance. They had never expected Earth to commit so fully to their defense, and now, seeing the humans fight with such ferocity, they rallied. Illyrian civilians took up arms alongside human soldiers, forming a unified front that not only slowed the Zither's advance but began to turn the tide against them. This was more than just a battle for survival, it was a battle for dignity, and humanity's presence had given the Illyrians the courage to fight back. Meanwhile, in the sky above the planet, the Zither command ships were falling one by one. The human fleet continued to press the advantage, exploiting every weakness the Zither exposed. Their once impenetrable formation was now a scattered mess, their ships barely able to maintain any semblance of cohesion. The Zither captains, panicked and desperate, issued conflicting orders, making the situation worse as confusion spread through their ranks. Kravas could no longer deny what was happening. His fleet, his invasion, his entire plan, everything was falling apart. He watched as his flagship's shields flickered, unable to withstand the onslaught of human firepower any longer. He had always prided himself on being the unshakable leader, the conqueror who had never known defeat. But now, faced with the undeniable reality of his crumbling forces, that confidence was gone. For the first time in his reign, Kravas considered retreat. The thought of abandoning his conquest was abhorrent, but he couldn't ignore the fact that staying would mean certain destruction. The humans had made their move, and it was clear they weren't stopping until the Zither were wiped from the battlefield. Kravas gave the order to withdraw, hoping to salvage what little remained of his once mighty fleet. But the humans weren't about to let them escape so easily. As the Zither ships began to retreat, humanity's forces pursued, picking off stragglers with brutal efficiency. The Zither retreat was disorganized, chaotic. Ships collided in their haste to flee, and those that fell behind were destroyed in a series of precision strikes. What had once been an unstoppable invasion force was now reduced to a fleeing remnant, limping away from the system with their tails between their legs. Kravas' flagship, the largest and most heavily armed of the fleet, attempted to make a final stand, but even that proved futile. The humans had anticipated his every move. As his ship attempted to break through the human lines, it was surrounded. Kravas watched in horror as his command systems began to fail, one by one, until his ship was defenseless. In a last-ditch effort, Kravas ordered a full-power surge to break free from the human encirclement, but it was too late. Human ships closed in from all sides, and in a single, coordinated volley, they unleashed their final strike. The flagship, once the pride of the Zither fleet, exploded in a brilliant flash of light, signaling the end of Kravas' reign and the total collapse of the invasion. As the remnants of the Zither fleet fled the system, humanity stood victorious. They had kept their word, defended their allies, and sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. You do not harm those under humanity's protection without paying the ultimate price. The battle was over, but the implications of what had just transpired were only beginning to ripple through the galaxy. The debris from the Zither fleet still drifted in the aftermath of the battle, a silent testament to humanity's swift and decisive victory. But the war was not over. The galaxy, once watching with passive interest, was now on high alert. The destruction of Krava's fleet and the humiliation of the Zither Dominion sent shockwaves across every corner of the galactic community. The message was clear: humanity had not only defended their allies, but they had also shattered the illusion of Zither invincibility. In the halls of the Galactic Federation, the power brokers who had remained neutral now found themselves scrambling to reassess their positions. For years, the Zither Dominion had been viewed as an unstoppable force, one that could expand at will and crush opposition with ease. Now, that image was in ruins. The Zither had not only been beaten but utterly decimated by a species they had arrogantly dismissed. It wasn't just the military might of humanity that unnerved the Federation. It was their unflinching resolve, their refusal to back down even when facing a vastly larger force. Species that had once questioned humanity's place in the galaxy now saw them as a formidable power, one that couldn't be ignored. Diplomats from various worlds began sending quiet feelers to Earth, wanting to understand more about this species that had changed the balance of power overnight. Meanwhile, back in Zither-controlled space, the fallout from the defeat was even more severe. The news of Krava's death and the destruction of his fleet reached the Dominion's core systems within days. What had been a stable, oppressive regime began to crack under the weight of its leader's catastrophic failure. Warlords and governors, who had once pledged loyalty to Krava's, now saw an opportunity to seize power for themselves. Civil unrest, once unthinkable in Zither society, began to spread. Dissidents who had been crushed under the Empire's iron fist suddenly found the courage to rise. The Dominion, so confident in its might, was now on the verge of fracturing. Krava's death had created a vacuum, one that his successors were scrambling to fill. But without their feared leader, the Zither no longer projected the same level of dominance. Even among their own people, there was doubt in their leadership, doubt in their future, and doubt in their ability to maintain control. As Zither forces retreated to the core worlds, licking their wounds, the allied species under humanity's protection began to breathe easier. For the first time in years, they weren't living under the constant threat of annihilation. The Illyrians, who had been the target of Krava's invasion, were especially grateful. Their entire civilization had been moments away from destruction, and it was humanity who had saved them from that fate. On the Illyrian homeworld, celebrations erupted as the news of the victory spread. The humans, now seen not just as allies but as saviors, were celebrated across the planet. Diplomatic ties between Earth and the Illyrians grew even stronger, solidifying an unbreakable bond that would last for generations. The humans had risked everything to defend their friends, and now, the Illyrians stood ready to repay that loyalty. But Earth was not content to simply bask in the glory of victory. Humanity's leadership knew that the Zither would not stay down forever. Despite their internal struggles, the Zither Dominion was still vast and powerful. They would regroup, rebuild, and seek revenge. The defeat had wounded them, but they were far from defeated entirely. Humanity's military began preparations for the inevitable. Earth's shipyards were working around the clock, producing more advanced warships and refining the technology that had given them the edge in the previous battle. New defense systems were deployed to the allied worlds, ensuring that if the Zither or any other aggressor tried to strike again, they would be met with even more formidable resistance. But more than just military preparations, humanity also focused on strengthening their diplomatic ties with other species. They understood that their victory had changed the dynamics of the galaxy, and now was the time to build alliances. Species that had once been neutral, or even wary of humans, began to approach Earth, seeking partnerships and mutual defense pacts. Earth's diplomats, once sidelined in galactic politics, were now at the center of it. Meetings with alien leaders became a regular occurrence, with humanity offering their expertise not just in military matters, but in technology and trade. The galaxy had always been fragmented, with various powers jockeying for control. But now, with the Zither dominion destabilized, there was an opportunity to bring a new order, one based not on fear, but on cooperation and shared interests. Among these new alliances were species that had once been under the thumb of the Zither, forced to pay tribute or face destruction. With Kravas gone and his empire teetering on the brink of collapse, they saw a chance for freedom. These species rallied to humanity's cause, seeing Earth as a protector that stood against tyranny. They pledged their support, offering resources, military assistance, and their own advanced technologies in exchange for the security that came with being allied to Earth. The more humanity's influence grew, the more the galaxy shifted. Old power structures that had been in place for centuries were now being questioned. Even the Galactic Federation, once slow to act, began to rethink its approach. The Federation had long been a passive organization, more focused on maintaining the status quo than challenging the dominant empires like the Zither. But with Earth now rising as a major power, some in the Federation began to advocate for a more active role in galactic governance. Back on Earth, there was a cautious optimism. The victory against the Zither had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of, but it had also placed a target on their back. Earth's leaders knew that the Zither would eventually strike back, and when they did, it wouldn't just be for revenge, it would be to restore their fractured empire and crush anyone who had dared to oppose them. Yet humanity was ready. They had made a promise to their allies, and they had kept it. Now they were prepared to keep fighting for that promise, no matter the cost. The galaxy had underestimated humans once before, and it had cost them dearly. They would not make that mistake again. The Zither, despite their losses, would eventually regroup. But when they returned, they would find a galaxy that was no longer afraid of them. They would find that humanity had rallied the weak, united the divided, and created a force that could stand against even the most powerful empires. And so, as the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, Earth stood tall, not as conquerors, but as protectors. They had given their word, and they had proven that their word was their bond. Humanity had shown that they were willing to fight, not just for themselves, but for the friends and allies who stood beside them. The galaxy had changed forever. And at the center of that change was Earth, a planet that had once been seen as insignificant, now leading the charge for a future built on unity and strength. The Zither would come again. But this time, the galaxy would be ready. The defeat of the Zither Dominion had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy, but the echoes of that battle were still felt in every corner. Across countless systems, species once oppressed or bullied into submission by the Zither were rising up. They no longer feared the empire that had dominated them for generations, and humanity's victory had proven that even the mightiest of empires could be brought low. The Zither Dominion, now fractured and leaderless, was on the brink of collapse. Krava's death had left a power vacuum that no one had anticipated. The once united empire was now divided between warlords and military factions, each scrambling for control, each trying to claim legitimacy. Civil war loomed, with the galaxy watching closely to see which faction would emerge as the new ruling power. But this time, the galaxy wasn't standing idly by. Humanity had set a precedent. They had shown that even the smallest, weakest allies deserved protection, and now, other species were following their example. The power dynamics were shifting. Planets that had once been part of the Zither's dominion were seceding, declaring independence and seeking protection from humanity and its allies. They had seen Earth's resolve, its willingness to fight for justice, and now they sought to join a coalition of like-minded worlds. Earth had become a beacon of hope. Species that had previously viewed humanity with suspicion or caution now saw them as protectors, willing to defend not for profit or conquest but for the principle that every species had the right to exist in peace. Human diplomats were busy forging new alliances, solidifying the network of trust that had begun during the war with the Zither. The galaxy was no longer a fractured collection of isolated powers. Instead, under humanity's leadership, it was slowly coalescing into something more unified, an alliance built on the values of mutual defense, cooperation, and shared prosperity. But Earth's leadership was not naive. The destruction of Kravas and his fleet had been a decisive blow, but it was not the end of the Zither dominion. The various factions within the Empire would regroup, and humanity knew that the next confrontation could be even more devastating. Their victory had drawn attention from powers far beyond the Zither, and not all of it was positive. While some species admired humanity's strength and loyalty, others saw it as a threat to their own ambitions. The Galactic Federation, long seen as a neutral body that rarely intervened in conflicts, now found itself at a crossroads. Some within the Federation saw humanity's rise as an opportunity for a stronger, more unified galaxy. They believed that humanity's influence could help reform the Federation into something more proactive, something capable of standing against tyrannical forces like the Zither. Others, however, were wary. They feared that Earth's growing power could disrupt the delicate balance of galactic politics, and they weren't sure what a galaxy led by humans would look like. Earth's diplomats worked tirelessly to reassure their new allies. They made it clear that humanity had no interest in ruling the galaxy or forming an empire of its own. Their only goal was to protect their friends, to create a galaxy where no species had to live in fear of invasion or subjugation. This message resonated with many, but it also stirred resentment in those who had once benefited from the chaos and conflict that defined galactic politics. Still, the reality was undeniable. Humanity had become a central figure in the galaxy's future, and as Earth's influence grew, so did the responsibility to maintain that position. The military might of humanity was already preparing for the next inevitable conflict. While diplomats worked to build alliances, Earth's shipyards churned out more advanced warships, and military scientists developed new weapon systems that would ensure humanity stayed ahead of its enemies. The Zither, meanwhile, were in disarray. The empire that had once expanded unchecked across the stars was now fractured, with each warlord trying to seize power. Skirmishes broke out within their own territories, and the galaxy watched as the Zither dominion began to implode. Some factions tried to negotiate with humanity, hoping to strike deals that would allow them to retain power in exchange for peace. But Earth's response was firm. The Zither had brought war to the galaxy, and now they had to face the consequences. Humanity's leadership understood that the galaxy was watching their every move. While the Zither's internal conflicts weakened them, there was a delicate balance to maintain. If humanity acted too aggressively, they risked becoming the very thing they fought against, an empire imposing its will on others. But if they showed too much restraint, the Zither or another rising power might see it as a sign of weakness. The solution, as Earth's leaders saw it, was to empower their allies. Instead of expanding their own military reach, humanity focused on strengthening the defenses of the species that had come under their protection. Earth shared its technology, trained allied militaries, and helped bolster the defenses of worlds that had once been vulnerable to Zither aggression. The goal wasn't to create a galaxy dependent on human protection but to build a coalition that could stand on its own. And it wasn't just the Zither that concerned humanity. Other powers in the galaxy, some hidden in the shadows, were watching closely, weighing their options. Earth's decisive actions against the Zither had sent a clear message, but it had also drawn attention from those who saw an opportunity in the shifting balance of power. Humanity's rise had disrupted the old order, and not everyone was pleased with that change. As the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, the Zither remnants began to regroup. One warlord, in particular, a former general under Kravas, began consolidating power. He saw himself as the rightful heir to the Zither throne, and while his forces were diminished, he still controlled vast resources and military assets. His plan was clear: to unite the fractured dominion under his rule and launch a campaign of vengeance against humanity and its allies. But humanity was ready. Earth's intelligence networks had been tracking the movements of this warlord for months, and they knew that a second conflict with the Zither was inevitable. The first battle had been a warning, but this next war would be about survival. If the Zither managed to reunite and strike back, it could plunge the galaxy into chaos once again. The galaxy, however, had changed. Humanity's allies were stronger, more united, and better prepared for what was coming. Earth had given them the tools and the confidence to defend themselves, and now, they stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Illyrians, once fearful of extinction, were now fortified and prepared to defend their worlds alongside humanity's fleet. Other species, once scattered and isolated, had joined the coalition, forming a network of mutual defense that made any future invasion far more difficult. As the Zither warlord prepared for his campaign of vengeance, he found that the galaxy was no longer his for the taking. Humanity and its allies had formed a wall of resistance that even the most powerful empire would struggle to break through. And behind that wall stood Earth, resolute and unshakable, ready to defend its friends with the same ferocity and loyalty that had crushed Kravas and his fleet.